Hi, welcome to another episode of Unqork'd and Unscripted with me, Gary Hoberman. I feel lonely here. Normally, I will be bringing you the most amazing guests, sharing their secrets of success and how they got to where they are and what they learned and favorite books. But this time, it's going to be a little bit different. So, the actual messaging here that we started with was red pill, blue pill, and for those like me who grew up and in the 90s, and at that point it was Java. At the end of that, Java AWT, we had a lot of not .NET yet, but VB and C++. And Matrix was the movie that was very popular. It was one of my favorite movies and continues to be. I'm going to basically give you a little bit, I guess, of the prologue of today, which is my story with Matrix isn't necessarily with watching the movie, which of course I love in the books, but it's really about how it helped me in my career, which is interesting. So, just a little bit of background here. So, I was probably at that point a senior VP at Citigroup, Solomon Smith Barney, most likely at that point, not even Citi yet. And I was doing well. I was moving up the corporate ladder. I was achieving, and I was respected for technology and coding and leading teams and engineering. And it was interesting because there was an opportunity that came up where I'll never forget. Our CIO went in front of 7,000 engineers and said, you know, I'm hearing that we have like a 75% delivery rate of success. And that if that's true, that's incredible, but there's no way that's true because no one in the world has that level of success in software delivery. And like, so we're going to implement systems and system development lifecycle processes to start to track, requirements and stage gates and what did you say it would cost and what did it cost and how long did it take and actually what do you think it would take? And basically, the two dimensions were on time and on budget, and we'll track that and see really what it is, and we're going to deploy a set of tools and to do that and help us from time reporting. And I'm sure I'm telling you things everyone knows, but when they were going to launch this, I was asked by a friend to say, "Do you have any ideas of how to make this fun?" And I basically said, "Yeah, let's film our own version of the Matrix and enter the SDLC Matrix." And so we basically, because I had the idea, I had to basically grab my camcorder. For those who don't know, it used to be a camcorder. You'd walk around to hook it up to a computer. You would have a wire and basically download it and edit. And I wrote a script and I filmed and I got actors and it was like amazing. And I wish I could show you the copy of this, but we basically did enter the SDLC matrix and we filmed, architects were jumping in here and it was amazing because it was basically this concept of, are you ready for the change? Are you ready to jump in and change and do something new, embrace the future? And what was interesting about the video was it was shown in the next town hall to 7,000 people, and suddenly I was very well known, and I was invited to the next leadership meeting. I got to know all the CIOs, and you could say that was a way for them to see my accomplishments even closer. And it was something completely outside of engineering coding that did it. And I'm definitely not a producer or a film, but it's just a fun story. So to me, The Matrix was more about change. And there's that scene in The Matrix where the Morpheus sits down with Neo and says, are you going to choose to see the reality or do you want to stay in kind of the fairyland you've been living in? And you have to make that choice. And I think that's kind of what today's session's about. So, and by the way, I always feel like I am more like Morpheus trying to help people see the reality. And today, my goal is I'm going to try to challenge you to take the right pill before we leave today and hopefully see what's happening, the truth, because it's a fun story. And to me, this is more just about having fun. And as you're watching, this is going to be a little unique, is you got to participate. And I'm hoping you'll challenge and come up with ideas as we go through this. So first off, I love everyone, if you use the comment section to share, that's how we'll see it. Think about any technology, a prompt you might give an AI tool today to build an application. What might it be? What might that prompt say in order to build something, create something simple, something complex, any industry, anything? You could throw that right in comments. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically start to walk through what Unqork is about and why did we create it, and like why do we think low code, no code should never exist as a category, and how we're thrilled not to be included as we move through this journey. And basically, how should software engineering evolve in the future? And what I meant by this was, it should be interactive, challenge me. We'll walk through the assumptions and just have a little fun here in the discussion. So normally I have an amazing guest today that is you, and I get to basically just be challenged. So again, okay, we have our first one here to create an employee onboarding app. Keep going, keep throwing those in. You got to actually give a little more specifics. So it's a good prompt, but maybe something a little complicated in there as well, and what might be unique about that. And I love the conversation. So I'm going to start off with specifically just some slides in how I see, let's call it the matrix, but what is Unqork? And the slides I'm going to show you as we go through this are slides that I use when I present to CEOs and I present to CIOs and COOs. And it took years to basically come up with the right, when you think about the imagery that's been in my head for the last 30 years. And what was amazing to sit down with OpenAI and Gemini and basically through prompts like what we're doing here, um, get it into something which actually I could refine and see the image for the first time. And you kind of feel like you're sitting there talking to like a police reporter or something like that, like, hey, put a shape here and go through here. So the point of Unqork is simple. And if you were a CEO and I was sitting with you for the first time, and my message would be very simple. We, all of us, we've been creating software wrong for the last 30 years. So I started on Wall Street in 1994 building trading platforms, high speed, mission critical, everything from money transfer systems to equity fixed income to correspondent clearance systems, critical path systems. And as an engineer, you're taught to think in things in terms of these boxes you see on the screen there. And you're really taught to say, hey, business, you have something you need. That's great. Describe it to me. Tell me what it is. And what I'm going to do as an engineer is basically break it into these boxes here, these train lines. And like the lines are like, we're going to need a presentation layer. We need business logic. We're going to need integration and workflow and rules engines. And we need to basically transform and load data. So we need an ETL tool. AI is now here, which is great. And we need basically role-based access controls and data storage. And data storage is databases, like, you could have the Oracles or SQL. File storage is any system designed to store documents. And there's a lot of them. And the reality is, first off, we think of things in terms of these boxes and we say we're going to basically pick the best of breed of each of these train lines and basically duct tape it together to make a solution. So why is this wrong? Well, first off, a business solution typically needs all of these. So the first suggestion of prompt I saw was employee onboarding. I actually got to build that at Citigroup for fun. It wasn't I didn't support HR. It was just they thought I could actually do something which wasn't done before, and we did. But you think about employee onboarding, I'm going to need a way to basically capture data from uploading your W-9, which would be stored in file storage, through all of your socials and date of births and past history, which would be in databases. There'll be a lot of business logic because based on different products and countries and regions and buildings, you're going to ask different things, or you might not be able to ask one question in a different country. And so there's integration because guess what? Any data you collect in employee onboarding is going to have to go into your HRS, your HR system. And maybe there's a job rec system that basically captures data on job recs. You're going to need rules and workflows, handoffs. You're going to basically take the request, route it through the system, track, whether or not an ID was set up, whether or not the system was enabled. You're going to be transforming data, loading into dashboards and analytics. You need to make sure from a role-based access controls point of view, people have least privilege, because the reality is, you can't show social to everyone. It's got to be to only key people that could see it. But every single field needs to be entitled based on role and permissions and users. And so when you think about a problem, it's broken down into those boxes. And the reality is, we as leaders, IT leaders, we basically have been taught to think in things in terms of these boxes. And what I'm going to tell you is they're all wrong. That's part of the problem of the last 30 years is We've been constrained to think of things in terms of these boxes. So why is it wrong? First off, humans invented 9,000 languages to speak to machines. Machines don't understand a single one. So humans invented runtimes, compilers, and interpreters to interpret and change our cryptic language, like a Java, to run in a JVM in order to basically have a machine understand and execute. .NET uses CLRs, assembler, COBOL, you have Kix and OS 390. You could keep going on. Then databases, we wrote languages, DDL, SQL, you have NoSQL. All these are languages that we basically work with and have taught to do cryptic languages that very few people could actually do speak well, let's just say. And so business logic is transformed into language, integration is language, all different languages, workflow is language, rules is language. Now, language is one thing, and you could master it, same way you could master ancient Greek, but the challenge is the language runs on a runtime. So I mentioned JVMs. How about HTML, CSS, JavaScript running in a browser that you can't choose or control? And what basically happens is you have this concept of, I've got my application built, and assuming it's built correctly, but the second it stands up, there's going to be maintenance on every one of these lines for the next infinite number of years until the technology goes end of life. So you actually can't predict or test every single scenario that's going to occur. CrowdStrike and Microsoft did a really good job of showing us specifically what that looks like. You can't test every scenario. Not only that, but you can't go back in time and actually show a transaction of what it looked like because you could never recreate the environment from scratch. Now, there's lots of tools in the low code, no code space that have all promised the world and said, here's how it works. Every single one of those tools, the second they let you write even a single line of JavaScript, you're into this bucket you see here. Because that JavaScript line can't receive updates anymore because you'll break. There's no question you'll break. And that JavaScript is going to run on an environment. So it'll be running on an engine or a JVM or JavaScript rendering engine you have no control over. You have no say, no control. So you don't know what it will do. And when you think about it, like the image in my head that basically came to me when I was a CIO and I was managing all of this was this. And it was basically an image of an empty warehouse to start, which was beautiful, light, clean warehouse, which is the application was launched. That's not the case. The reality is when you build an application, whether it's custom coded using Python or C++ or Java or .NET, whether it's on a low code, no code platform like Microsoft or Salesforce or ServiceNow or any of them out there, basically every single application, even if it's sharing the same infrastructure, even if it's cloud, even if it's on a platform, this is it. This is what you built. You built a warehouse that's basically has an endless supply of boxes arriving. The boxes are labeled defect, change request, technical debt. You have security issue, vulnerability testing coming, COB testing coming, DR testing coming. You have data retention policies. You have GDPR compliance. You have every Privacy 2020 compliance coming. You have FedRAMP if you're going to serve the FedRAMP. And the reality of everything in this box is, first off, you can't keep up with it. And that's one reality. The second reality is the entire warehouse is basically built with material that's deteriorating the second you stood it up. It's end of life coming. There isn't a single technology today outside of Unqork'd that you could say doesn't have a shelf life date set, and it's going to expire soon. And all that means is you're going to have to recreate this warehouse. And so this was the image that I basically had when I created Unqork'd. So I was a CIO. You would think I basically achieved what I was looking for. I was miserable because of this image. This is what was stuck in my head. Now, the reality is that's one application, but I maintained 8,000 different applications. And each application itself was its own building with its own issues, with its own infinite line of boxes arriving that needed to be basically worked through. And when you step back and look at the neighborhood, you will hire ethical hackers to try to improve the security and find issues in a single building. They're going to tell you that it needs an alarm system and maybe it needs a security guard and maybe you need your windows replaced. And they'll give you a list of all the things you need to do to make that building secure. and you'll spend 6 weeks, 9 weeks, 3 months basically improving the security of that single building. There's 7,000 buildings around it that don't even know about those issues or report, that look nothing like it. Even if you were using a low code, no code platform, every single application in the same instance is its own building. This is why we said low code, no code should never exist. It's making the problem worse. Even if you use a prompt to build an application today, or if you use any of the new app builder platforms out there, this is what you wind up with. This is the world you live in. And as a CIO, you basically look at this and you can't keep up. 80% of your spend is keeping this running. The truth is, you cannot face a regulator and say you're secure, because by the time you started the pen test and finished it and then fixed all the issues, there's 3,000 new vulnerabilities have been created in the world. The only advantage is the hackers have, because the hackers could simply look for what could I exploit and how do I find all the buildings that have that same issue. That's because software itself, and since for the last 30 years, going back to what I've seen, all the software today we've been doing is basically cloning. So we copy and paste code from Stack Overflow. We import an open source library like Log4j, and then we break the connection to the source. So we take a copy of it, a clone, an instance. And the entire world of software today is cloning. It's copying. The second you inject a single line of code into any low code, no code system, you cloned it. You've frozen in time. That's its own building. So the reality is you got to stop the way we actually create software. And not just like the business logic, not just the presentation, but it's everything in the stack has to change. From the way we present it to the database to the file storage, all has to change. And so this is the, red pill, blue pill moment. This is the reality of actually what I had seen when I was a CIO. This is why 7 years ago I left the corporate world, the C-suite, the corporate jet, and basically said it's got to be a better way to do this. So with that said, like, what is Unqork? If you're CEO and I'm sitting with you, it's very simple. It's boring. It's mundane. We're this missing layer in the infrastructure stack. The best way to think of us is we're basically the equivalent of Amazon's shipping warehouses, the fulfillment engine. So create your applications inside of a warehouse, and we'll have it to the customer in 2 hours from the time you start to finish, or whatever time it takes. But the reality is, migrate your whole data center to us. The thing that we're doing different is, first off, there's no more language. There's no more code. There's no more JavaScript. There's no more CSS, no more HTML, no more Java.NET COBOL assembler. By removing the language, we also remove the runtime dependency, which means you no longer need to worry about, will it work? Will the CrowdStrike example happen to you? The answer is no. In addition, what you're basically doing is, for the first time, you're benefiting from a consolidated warehouse with others, where my team is basically continuously improving the automation of that warehouse, the security updates, the compliance updates, HIPAA compliant, ISO compliant, WORM compliant, Privacy 2020. We have SOC 2 Type 2, Privacy Shield, GDPR compliant, FedRAMP certified. List just keeps going on and on. And every application benefits from every change we make. And we could basically provide the automation and make those changes, because there's no custom coding that will break it. There's no runtimes that will break it. So in our world, whether you create your applications here or you migrate your entire data center to us, all your mainframe, all your Java, you're basically getting to a world where you're benefiting from everyone else for the first time in history. So software becomes, the advantage is for you to focus on your business logic and not worry about maintenance. Basically, the simplest example is there's no more maintenance in our world. The tech debt, end of life, you'll never say it again. The word version doesn't exist anymore. You are all on the same version as everyone else. So when one customer runs a penetration test on Unqork'd, they're pen testing you. The next hour, someone else might run a pen test on Unqork'd, they're pen testing you. So we're seeing pen test results come back with 0 issues for the first time in my lifetime. And then when you think about performance updates and improvements, if we make up an improvement to our workflow component or our presentation component, like React library, we could achieve 30% performance improvement across all customers for the first time. No customer asked for it. No one knew it's coming. It's in the release notes. You see it. and your customers are happier. What a concept, like continuous improvement. So this was the world that I had seen when we created Unqork. And it's kind of like this is the messaging when I'm sitting with CEOs and CIOs and saying, are you ready to basically benefit from every app around you? So every application you build is making every other application more secure, more scalable, more reliable, cheaper to basically deploy. And that's the message. With all the SDLC processing you need as an IT, with all the architecture reviews you need, with all the security reviews, with all the CISO compliance reviews, it's all set. And that's kind of the picture we had of software. And when we think about it in general, from a technology point of view, it's simple. We're the missing layer in the infrastructure stack. If I could wave a magic wand, our engine, the Unqorked server engine, would be running on every single CPU and GPU in the world today, every device. It replaces everything from HTML, JavaScript, CSS on the presentation side, every API integration on the middleware side, all the data storage and file storage on the server side, and basically everything in between becomes nothing but describing a business need in terms of data, data that could have no vulnerabilities inside of data, data that doesn't know aging, it'll last forever, data that's democratized, so everyone could read it. So the final thing I would say is, before we jump into real examples here, have a little fun, is the concept of a time capsule. So this, when you think about software, you think about version control and Git and repositories, and it was PVCS before that and VCS, and we always say we version software. The truth is, like, I've never seen a smooth deployment done in my life. I've actually never seen a smooth rollback done in my life. And the problem is because the code itself, when it's deployed in an environment, it's actually not just one piece. It's I'm adding a database field, I'm adding a middleware field, I'm adding an HTML field. It all has to go at the same time. It has to be optional versus required because you'll break everything if you make it required. And there's an art to basically deployment. And the truth is, while your customers are using your software today, they're using it at a point in time where you can never recreate the transaction. You can't recreate the logic, the HTML, the CSS, the presentation, the server logic. You can't recreate the services that executed, the results of those services. You actually can't recreate the runtime because the runtimes are continuously being updated, as are databases and libraries. But in our world, it's very different. So every time you change an Unqork application, we never remove the old app. It's simply a record in a database because your application is nothing but data. There's no more language. And that data is universal. It's open sourced. It'll last forever. And when we add a new version, what we could do is we basically say, you added a version, rollback becomes a click of a button. You could preview before you roll back to see if you break anything. And what you could also do is you could version all the data in flight with all the services called in flight into basically what's the essence, a time machine that you could show a regulator what it looked like in the past when it happened. So we call that data lineage. We've had that since the beginning of Unqork. For 7 years, we've had that built into the platform because we know customers have been dreaming of that. In an AI world, suddenly we become the only software to build AI applications, which gives you AI lineage, meaning your models are going to change daily. Your models are going to change intraday. You're going to take OpenAI and replace it with Gemini. You're going to basically find a specialty model, in insurance or banking, and you're going to deploy that. Unqork basically could give you a time machine to go back in time and see what was passed to which model when, what did it return, and if the model could give us back the result, it could also store the result and the explanation, and you could basically automate everything at that point. So that's the world of Unqork. This is the red pill, blue pill moment, which is software can't do what I just described. Now, I'm going to make it a little real here. So I'll stop for a second. So I wanted to see a little bit about the comments before we jump in. So create an employee application. So Japinda, thank you that's great for the therapist. It provides home sessions for little children. Real use case, the therapists need to have certifications, take mandatory training classes. Enterprise IT, I kind of like this. This is good. So home sessions for children. Let's just actually copy that for a second. And I'll go back to sharing now. So I'm going to just quickly put that prompt into ChatGPT. Create an employee application. I'm going to tell it to basically please use HTML, JavaScript to validate CSS for design. The database will be Oracle, and middleware will be MuleSoft. And let's just see what happens. So I have no idea here. So great, we have HTML that's created, full name, certifications, training, etc. We have a body created for CSS. We have JavaScript validation that's been created. So it's basically making sure the form is filled out correctly. You could see the code to validate. So find the full name field, trim it, certification field. If full name is equal to empty, then message this, alert. And basically, let's submit the form. It doesn't know how to do this yet, which is interesting. So it's giving me instructions. It wouldn't know how to create the DDL yet. That's interesting. So what you would basically do is you're deploying 5 different languages, 5 different structures, each with their own runtimes, each with their own code. Even something as simple as this JavaScript here, it's something which when you look at it, you're going to maintain this. You're gonna have to worry about the runtime it runs on. So in Unqork's world, if I come back to Unqork for a second, maybe I'm gonna just prompt that same prompt here. And I'm gonna basically I have no idea what it's gonna do, but we're gonna basically, this is an Unqork app that's talking to any AI platform. In this case, I'm choosing Gemini. And instead of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Java code, MuleSoft, database, DDL, it'll basically break down that problem into data. So first off, this is what it actually defined. So it says, hey, I've got a first name field. It's required is true. That's a lot easier than JavaScript to basically say, if it's not filled out, alert the user. Because in essence, that one JSON element there, that one data, not just describes how it might be rendered to someone, but it also describes how an API might expect it to be required, as well as how a database might store it. And if you look at actually what it achieved here, so it basically is very readable. I'll copy that. And at the same time, what it basically built was this form. And you could see it's required, and if I don't answer it, they'll basically tell me that there's a problem. It's required, that's great. Email address is going to be an email, phone number. It has to be a real phone number. Address could be a lookup. So this will be bound, and I could say, find me where Unqork's headquarters is. That looks right. Show it to me, that's great. Certification, expiration date, training complete, yes or no. And it actually is pretty cool. It actually made a reflexive nature here question. So if you ask that same question for a low code, no code platform, even reflexive questions are basically code. You have to code it. And several platforms even allow eval to be executed, which is so dangerous from an ethical hack point of view. So, basically you train, available experience, references, you have a background check, yes or no, and we've got a place to basically upload your resume. Pretty simple. So this app that's built exists purely in data. And in 2 seconds, I could come into my Unqork environment and just say we're creating an employee onboarding app. I select the design system. I'm going to say it's a workflow. Create it. So when we come into this replaces every BPM tool in the world. There should be no more BPM tools either. So I have a employee. This is HR is going to start the process. And when HR comes in, they're going to tell us about the employee. But you know what? We're going to add a new swim lane because we want the employee to actually upload their own W-9 and information, if that's the case. And so that's their role. And let's just edit this and say, first step is, who are you? And you could do decisioning and sequential processing and parallel processing and signals and noise and message here all comes out. A conditional start, signal starts. I'm going to do a simple 2-step process for now. Just end it. And employee info. And if I save this, this is now, this system, which was just describing data, is as secure as any system you're using today in the world, or more, depending on which system it is. And if I just plug that in, I could now change the layout, Maybe I got to change a few things I didn't like. So come back up here. We've got two columns, it could be first name here, last name here, email here, phone. That's great. And you basically could see the rules, business rules are all defined here. If I save this, I've got my schema defined. I could already start to actually interact with this anywhere in the world. This is now an app that would work on a phone, tablet, any desktop, integrated into any environment, fully functional, and I could change it. The difference is there's no more technical debt. There's no more end of life. There's no more security issues. There's no more performance issues. This functionality to basically do reflexive isn't code. It's a definition. The date field, you're using the same date field as 5,000 production apps that are using it before you and continue to use it. This file field, which maybe stores it in either S3 or Google Systems or Microsoft Azure or your own bucket, it's been used by everyone else before you. So you have scale. So I'm going to stop there and just any questions before we wrap up. Now, I know someone said, is there going to be a trilogy here, which I kind of love. Any questions, any challenges from anyone in what I walked through? I'm curious to see which pill you would take, the red pill, blue pill definitions here. And the question is, did I convince you that software has been built wrong for the last 30 years and has to stop and change? And I'm just, to me, it's a curious question, I would say. So any feedback? If you want to do it offline, please find me on LinkedIn, connect with me. Happy to share there as well. And we might do this as a trilogy. Let's see how it goes. I definitely want to do one of these for security offices and one as well for business users. So again, I appreciate everyone joining us here and hope everyone has a great weekend until the next Unqork'd Unscripted. Thanks, everyone. Take care.